everyone, and good whatever wonderful moment of the day you are enjoying on your time zones as you are either watching us live now or later on through the recording. It is such a joy to welcome you again to our Hacking HR conversations. And right now, we are kicking off our January series. And this series is dedicated to HR therapy. We will be spending the next hour, a very, very short hour, talking about mental health strategies for HR people. My name is Minola Jacques. I am your co-host for the next hour. We have Jessa working her magic backstage, keeping us smooth with everything logistics and technical. And we have an amazing lineup of speakers. And please don't take my word for it. Jessa, please help me bring them on stage. It is a gloomy, rainy day here in Switzerland. So I was kind of looking forward to this conversation, and I am sure it will feel like sunshine. I would invite everybody in the audience, just for starters, drop us and keep on dropping us a short note. Let us know where you're listening to us from. It's always great to travel around the world through your comments. And then my invitation to all of you is, do consider the comments your conversation space. Consider the questions that we try to answer in the panel as much yours as it is our panelists. We've been learning so much from all of you, staying engaged through the comments, and every topic that we touch has so many more nuances across our shared intersectionalities. Here's my first difficult word for the day. I'm already running out of English. So, without further ado, let's make the most out of our time today. I see friends on the screen. I see new faces on the screen, which makes my heart very, very happy. What I will do, I will pass the e-mic around, and this year I'm gonna start off with something different. I will do it counterclockwise. So that will mean that Sandy, you will go first. And the first question is always easy. Just please kindly shortly introduce yourselves and do let us know what is so special about this topic that you decided to put your energy and time and insights with us here today. Sandy, so great to see you again. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm super happy to be here and nice to see you. Super excited that I get to see your bright, beautiful face today. So my name is Sandy. I've been doing HR for close to 25 years, and the reason why this topic is near and dear to my heart is because I think that HR's mental health is, it's one of those topics that is so still very taboo because we're expected to have it all together. We're HR, and so mental health is important because how can we, you know, quote unquote, have it all together if we are trying to, fill others' cups without filling our own cup.
Mm. Thank you so very much. Christy, it's been so long since we shared a conversation. Welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I'm so excited to see your faces. So I am from Lafayette, Louisiana, and like you were saying, we also have a very nasty, gloomy day over here today. It's going to be raining all week. Not a lot of fun. But I've been in HR for about over 20 years now, and why this topic is so important for me is something that I'll just be honest, I've always struggled with. Being HR, you do take on a lot of other people's problems, and whether you want to or not, you have a tendency, especially when I was younger, to take it home with me and let it drown me to some extent. So it is things that I like to share, tips and tricks that I've learned throughout the years to try to get past and be a better servant to others.
Thank you so much. Sheila, so wonderful to have you with us. Welcome. Good to see you.
Nice. Thank you so much. I appreciate being here. My name is Sheila Kruger. I was formerly the head of global benefits for Zoom Video Communications. One of the reasons I am super passionate about this is personal experience. My family is very uh, has been a vital user of the mental health space. But for myself, especially working at Zoom during the pandemic, ended up with a 3-month leave of absence that was really definitely mental health related. It affected my physical health as well. It was such a stressful time for everybody. You can see it in the stats, you know it's true. So I feel like I can really speak from a place of experience about how this can adversely affect the HR professional's life, and how to climb out of that and get back to being a working member of society and having your happiness back. And so that's exactly why I wanted to be part of this conversation.
Thank you so very much. And last but not least, I think, Pallavi, you are at the other extreme of our time zone. So thank you for being here in your evening. We so appreciate the extra effort. It's good to see you on this panel.
Same here, and good morning, everyone, and good evening from India. So I am Pallavi Poddar, and I'm from India. And obviously, it's a very difficult time for us because it's very cold for us here in India right now. So I'm from north of India. So coming to this part of why this topic is so close to my heart, I've been an HR professional for over 20 years now, and I'm leading HR for one of the building material organization. I mean, we end up taking so many difficult decisions, having so many difficult conversations, having, managing conflicts in and around the workplace, managing so many things. And somehow we just end up getting to hear what is HR doing. So, we know that exactly how and what the HR is facing in and out, and which I myself have gone through the entire time. Every time when there's a merger happening, you end up taking some difficult decisions. You have to let go of some people. You have to deal with COVID. You have to deal with grievances. You have to deal with, people not being well. So I think it is not about emotionally. We're also human being, ultimately. So for me, therefore, this becomes an important topic to kind of address and really take care of our own health as well.
Mm. How wonderful. And I already have a lot of mental post-its with so many conversation candies, and we'll definitely come back and collect as we move forward. But before we dive very, very deep into the topic, I do want to take a few minutes and set the context and set the background for our topic. I keep hearing, I keep reading that somehow the COVID pandemic allowed the conversations around mental health to rise to prominence. Many people say that this was just a long overdue opportunity to normalize them. Many companies, they still hope that this return to normal, whatever the return to normal, would also probably mean diminishing the priority over mental health. So my question to all of you is, how do you see the conversations around mental health, and how scalable and how sustainable do you see this topic moving forward with everything that we are facing? Layoffs, talent acquisition, talent management, talent retention challenges, a lot of conversations around, people being wholesome in both their life and both their work. So how are you on this topic? And I see I still have the reflex to open the first question diagonally. So Christy, that means that you go first, and then everybody consider the unmuting competition officially open. So Christy, please be our pioneer today.
Thank you. So how I see this moving forward, I'm just like you're saying, since COVID, I studied psychology way back in the early 2000s. And back then it was a very still taboo topic. People did not talk about it. My family suffered from mental illnesses. And if I ever try to even bring that up to my mother, the response was, oh, I don't have a problem. And it was continuous. Since COVID, though, thanks to the news media and thanks to Hollywood, I'll give them credit for this. They have brought this front and center. And I think that's because of us being social animals now suddenly got isolated very quickly, caused people even with the best mental health to struggle during that time period. How's this front and center for the rest? I think it shouldn't stop. It should always continue. And I think this is just the beginning of a long, long journey that we have, because honestly, there is still much we don't know about our mental health. There are things that neurosciences can't even answer. So I think there is ample room for growth in this particular area, especially as it relates to the workplace. You know, EAPs are great. That's fine. That covered us in the past. But I think as we move forward, we have to look at it in different angles, because that's only one piece of the puzzle. There are other things that we have to address. You know, conflict management, I see, is going to be a big thing coming up in the next few years. You know, I watch my child and as raising my kids, I'm trying to teach them conflict management, because I think in the workforce, that is a skill that is dying, and that is tied to mental health. We need to realize that this is not necessarily a bad thing, but the tools and resources, how to handle it. And the EAP is not going to necessarily give you all that. That is something that we can do as HR professionals and start training people to learn these things, that, you know, no's not always a bad word. There's other opportunities, and teaching them those pieces.
I just want to take a few seconds. We had this before, so I'm just doing a little bit of acronym subtitles here. So EAP is Employee Assistance Program. Thank you so much. Okay, who trained their fingers for the for unmuting? Let's see who's fast. Sandy.
So I do see a comment that Mary Beth put, using EAP is still taboo in some cultures or company cultures. Leaders have a critical role, and that is so true. And like Christy was saying, an EAP program is not the only solution, right? Because let's say, for example, my experience is more of, or my approach to solving something regarding mental health is more of a holistic approach, right? And then what? It's not a one size fits all. So I think this gives us an opportunity to actually expand, to see what else is out there. You know, some people use crystals to kind of help them calm down. You know, some people use journals to help them with their mental health. Some can use exercise. What are we doing as employers to actually help in those other areas where it's not a one size fits all? So I do think that, you know, it gives, this is, you know, like Christy say, we are just starting. This is just the beginning. There's so many different options, so many different things, and, you know, finding the triggers and finding solutions for those triggers. And again, it's not a one size fits all. It's not going to work for everybody. And even if it's the same trigger, it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, that it's going to work the same way that it worked for me. And, you know, finding, I do believe, especially here in the US, I do think that our healthcare system is not the best. I do think that we need to, you know, in the healthcare industry, there also has to be a push for all of this, because I'll give you an example. My son is autistic. So when I was looking into ABA therapy, they're telling me with a certain provider, they were telling me that it was going to be, my copay was going to be $90 for every single session. You're talking about, he was going to be required 5 sessions a week. You're talking about $500 to get my son ABA therapy, because of the fact that our healthcare is not where it needs to be to allow for those other spaces, those other alternative options. How long did it take us to be able to, you know, have acupuncture on there, chiropractic, you know, visits, again, alternative methods, you know? And so I do think that this is just the start, and we need to find ways to get our healthcare system, we need to find ways to get even our, you know, executives to be open to offering additional benefits to help to be able to gap that whole, you know, mental health. But EAP will cover the whole mental health aspect, you know.
Thank you, Sandy. Pallavi, I saw you unmuted a while back.
Yeah, so it's so interesting to hear Christy and Sandy. I mean, you know, obviously, I mean, I have also worked for an organization that was a US based, and now here based out of India. Things are very different. So when I say things are very different, I mean, for me, I mean, we talk about mental health every day, in and out. But I think we're very, very far right now in terms of accepting it and or in terms of adapting it. So for me, I really feel sad sometimes that, we as an organization, maybe probably do we really understand what a mental health issue a person is going through? Sometimes when you just quickly go up and go ahead and say, okay, you are laid off. I mean, layoff is an easy term to say, but then there's a mental health. Once the organization is talking about that we're taking care of the mental health, but at the other side, the next in the morning, you're laying off. Now, where is that balance of mental health, uh, you know, uh, talking and implementing? So I definitely see that disconnect. That's one part of it. The second part of it, which I mean, I still feel, do I as an individual really understand I need a support? I'm going through a issue. I really need someone, my surrounding, my people around, to really help me understand. I need to see visit the therapist, or I need to go and see that maybe there's an issue I'm going through. So it's not only about awareness, it is about training, it is about helping people to understand what mental health is all about. It is about organizations to really know that people, I mean, with every action they take or every decision they take, I understand it's for business, but in a way how it will be impacting the issue of an individual. Yes, organize most of the I would say insurance companies or the medical benefits and everything has started covering mental health, but I think that is so far. First, please, let's try and start accepting it, that there's an issue. I need to go to a doctor, I need to see a therapist. So for me, that's something really, really important, and I feel sad sometimes that how can I contribute to this cause.
Mm.
Yeah.
Sheila, so good to have you back with us.
Stop playing with the buttons. Stop playing with the buttons. Two things that have come up for me. First, around the question and what everybody else has been saying. With Cindy, the comment about how we need to expand what we're providing as employers. So important, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's available to everyone, but the cost is so prohibitive. And so how do we bring that in? And so I feel like it's a little off topic, but really I've seen the use of lifestyle spending accounts be very helpful for that type of thing, where you can use funds to spend on well-being or different kinds of things. And at Zoom we had for a while during the pandemic an LSA account that allowed employees to purchase groceries, because it was just a hard thing to get out and buy groceries. So grocery delivery, but we also had a big variety of things that people could use for mental health, because we recognized that while we had a great mental health program internally, that wasn't necessarily, talk therapy isn't for everybody. So if they wanted to use Calm or some other app, we would allow them to use that to pay for that. So I think those kinds of accounts can be very, very helpful for people to round out their health care. The other thing is, I think as employers, we need to make sure that we are providing the best possible place for our employees to land, to have that good mental health, right? So sometimes I think it's great that we're spending all this money for the Lyras and the Clios and the Mavens and the everything that we've got, Spring Health, Modern Health, but how much of that are we causing? Are we driving people into the solutions that we then say we're proud to have for them? Are we overworking our people? Do they not have enough support in their department? Are we spread so thin that we can't get everything done? The whole return to office RTO conversation has been very stressful for so many people. So I think we have to kind of look at that as well. And I do think there are some solutions that employers can, kind of have as part of their culture, automatically setting up meetings so they're only 50 or 55 minutes long instead of a full hour, and then making sure that you're actually stopping and encouraging people in that last 5 or 10 minutes of the hour, get up, walk around. Everybody's seen, I think by now, the brain scans of the people who just sit at their desk hour after hour in meetings. compared to the ones who get up even for 5 minutes. It's just amazing what a difference that can make. So setting up those kinds of things, making sure that your meetings are actually meaningful. We use the 3 A's at Zoom. Is this an agenda? Making sure there's an agenda. Do I have the actual people that need to be involved? So are the accountable people in this meeting? And then making sure that there's an action plan, so you don't have that same meeting over and over and over again with a bunch of action items that nobody bothered to write down and nobody's accountable for. So I think there's a lot we can do outside of even mental health to try and kind of level the playing field for everybody, so that we aren't driving them into this situation where they need to turn around and use other resources.
Wonderful insights, and as I can see already on the comments, people have taken away actionable things and ideas. And before we start getting this question, the conversation is being recorded, so you can always go back either in our LinkedIn space or hackinghrlab.io, our platform, and watch it again or recommend it to your colleagues or friends or just people that you want to inspire. Now, as promised, let's take this subject and ground it within HR. What does it mean to talk about mental health for HR people? And this has been a topic that became increasingly near and dear to my heart. I do change and transformation work in my everyday life, so can totally resonate with everything I have been reading and learning about secondary trauma, about compassion fatigue, about how you get the compounding effect of the people around you and your own experience. So I would really love to just have a few minutes and look at how is the mental health topic specifically relevant for people within the HR profession. And Pallavi, I would ask you to lead us into this.
Yeah, thank you so much. And, this topic is very close to my heart. Throughout, I think probably I wouldn't have realized so much as much during COVID, and after COVID, we realized it. So there was a time when suddenly HR was like the front runner everywhere. You've got the essentials to be working, you've got employees, you have to do pay cuts, you have to do layoffs, you have to do work from home, work from office, shift management, resource management, hiring, great resignation, everything. So in probably in 2 years, HR has seen everything. And we've just forgotten that we are human beings. Everybody of us who's working is a human being. I mean, I have also gone through pain. I've also gone through grievance. I've also gone through, illness, sickness, everything. But who's really talking to me about it? I am calling my employee that how are you? But who's actually calling me and checking on me? So I think for HR, I mean, I think, Manula, you just started saying that, about the compassionate. I mean, we also miss that compassion coming to us. We're expected to demonstrate to the world. We expected to be with that all the time. But it's HR, it's us, it's human beings. I mean, it's just, so keep the profession aside, treat us like a human being. So I think that's where I come from. So it comes really, really from within my heart. Some of the things which I've really started doing within my team, I think I really like what Sheila said. Just reduce the meetings. Very essential, important meeting, 15 minutes, review, close it, everybody's accountable, get it done, done and dusted. I will not disturb you over weekends. I will not disturb you after work hours. I will not disturb you, when you're off working, and I'll fight for it. Even others should not disturb, because I as my team, I as a manager may do that, but because as HR, we're actually interacting with thousands of other employees also. They may end up disturbing. So I think I will have to create that little space for my team where they can really feel that, yeah, there's someone to take care of me. At least that is something I can do, that they can reach out to me, they can reach out to someone. Apart from them, obviously there are other strategies in terms of having that conversations, giving them safe environment, they can come and talk. And and probably I would also love to do that. So in fact, I've also started doing and picking it up, that the day I'm so build that courage within me, I can go and speak up and talk about it. What am I feeling? What am I going through? To hear me out. So I think, yeah, this is something which I really wanted to share, and
Mm.
something I'm really, really emotional about.
I think one of the best ones for us in HR, and I think I would say would be the word no. Learning your limits, knowing your boundaries. No, I don't have time for that meeting today. I can schedule you in tomorrow, Wednesday, unless it's a fire, you can say no. Set your boundaries, be clear about, I'll give you an example. At the company that I work at now, I went ahead and I set my time. If my boss is going to be here, I know it's going to be a late day because she likes to stay late. So do I come in early? No, because I'm not going to sit here and be here 10, 11 hours. I got a little kiddo to go home to, right? So understanding what those boundaries are and making sure that also my boss, my employer knows, like, hey, this is what I'm willing to do hour-wise. I know I can accomplish what I need to accomplish in that day, but at this time, I'm heading home. Or, you have a movie date with your husband. You know what? I'm gonna come in a little bit earlier so that I can leave on time, and make sure that those at home also understand how important their time and they are to me. So to me, I would just say knowing your boundaries, knowing when to say no would be big.
Mm.
Yeah, I think one thing about HR is we looking at statistics. Only according to Gartner, only 9% of HR departments are really highly efficient and highly aligned to their business needs. And so that tells us that we're already operating at a deficit when we walk in the door, right? So there's a lot of things that I think can be done holistically within the department to help us work better, work smarter, rather than harder. So automation, whatever AI can do for you, any kind of technical solutions in automation is definitely going to be helpful. But I also think that we do need to make sure, like Cindy mentioned, that we're talking to our teams, and Pallavi, you mentioned it too, talking to our teams and giving them space to have those conversations about what's going on with them, and have those be truly meaningful conversations. How are you isn't enough anymore, right? It's just such a tossed off phrase at this point. And once again, as I'm talking with Hacking HR, I have to point out one of their amazing graphics that they had up in December, I think, that went to talk about how, instead of how are you, go to I genuinely care about you. And I'm sure you can find this on their LinkedIn page. But it really opened up my eyes, and it was more about, it's printed and up on my wall. That's how important I thought it was. Instead of how are you, it's, hey, I know work's been stressful. How are you taking care of yourself? And I have found this to be such a great resource, even as I'm talking to my other friends in the HR world. I have a lot of check-ins just to chat with people. And that's the first thing we do is talk about, let's get into the real nitty-gritty of this. Let's don't be surface. Let's don't just, yeah, I'm fine. Let's move on. Because you know what? 99% of us aren't really fine. We've had really a crazy few years. And it wasn't like it wasn't stressful before, right? Before the pandemic. And the pandemic came, huge paradigm shift. I always laughed because people would say, well, once it's over, we'll just go back to where it was before. And, even from the beginning, I was telling people it's not like this is a switch and it's going to go off and everything's going to be the same. There will be a second paradigm shift once we return to the office. And I do think we've seen that. It's not back to normal. It's a new normal. And we need to make sure that we're thinking about that as well, and then make sure that we're, talking to our team in a really heartfelt way.
Mhm.
Sheila, when you're talking about how you're doing, I think that was for me one of those questions that actually broke open a door for me when I was struggling very badly. I went to a lunch with someone actually outside of our organization in the marketing world. First question, of course, is how you doing? And in America, everyone's response is the same. I'm doing great. How are you? Right? Like that is just the natural knee-jerk response. And she just smiled at me and said, and just paused for a moment, just didn't say anything, and then looked at me again and said, no, really, how are you doing? And when she asked that question, it was like the floodgates opened up, and I just started crying because it came across as she really actually wanted to know. It wasn't just the generic, hey, how you doing? Let me get across what I need to get from you. Let me find out how you as a person individually is going through. And I think as HR professionals, the one thing that we can do for each other, because in our companies, I don't know if or when we're going to ever get to the point where our bosses or accounting, anyone actually notices the stress that we're under, but we can help each other as HR professionals. And so what I've learned to do is lean on to my network of other HR people. Hey, I am really struggling right now. What are you guys doing? And these connections, that I have built over the years have been one of my life-saving pieces for me as an individual. So when things get tough, I always reach out to my HR professionals because I have a tendency, we can talk to each other the way we can't talk to anyone else in our other departments. They can also understand the same things that we are going through. So it is something that I've learned. Also, Cindy, when you're talking about the holistic approach, when I struggled, I did everything. So I tell everyone, try everything out because you just never know what is going to be a fit for you. Growing up a Roman Catholic, I went see a shaman. I went do acupuncture. I saw a mental health counselor. I did everything. I picked up new hobbies just to try to keep my head above water. And you end up finding out what works for you and what doesn't. And testing out those different waters is another advice that I would give everyone. Try everything because you would be surprised what actually sticks with you as an individual. And it may not be what you think it's going to be.
Yeah. We are a couple of minutes into the second half of our conversation, and prompted by what all of you shared in this last round of answers, I do want to keep myself honest to a promise that I made myself. So in the later part of last year, what I realized was that what we share in our panels, very inspiring, very energizing. But many people in the audience live the reality of an HR of one. And everything that we share already feels overwhelming for a team. And I do want to give something to everybody listening, and everybody who will come across this conversation, or this conversation will probably find someone who is an HR of one. And how is their own mental health journey and experience, and what is feasible and achievable and meaningful for them. Christy, you did touch a little bit on, reach out to the community that is, outside and beyond your function. But I was wondering, what online hug can you give to HR of one? And I will just leave that question there, and wherever inspiration strikes. Christy, I saw you unmuted.
I think simply just sending messages every now and then just to check on people. I mean, I know it sounds small, but just to know that someone is thinking about you means the world. And maybe put on your calendar that, like, this week I'm going to check on this person, and then just have a rotation just to see how they're doing. It's very simple. Another thing, just compliment someone. Tell them that they did something really good, or that shirt looks really good on them today. Anything. I think that positive reinforcement when the world is turned upside down can really make a difference. The little things.
Yeah. And Christy, I love that checking in. Like I mentioned earlier, I have several friends in HR that I've got regular, little touch bases with, and even if it's 15 or 30 minutes. And the other part of that is not only are you helping them, you're really helping yourself. You're taking that break yourself. And as everybody in the comments is saying, and everybody on the panel is saying, we are so bad at taking care of ourselves first and putting that oxygen mask on. So it's so important to do that, because you're not really just doing it for them. You're doing it for yourself as well. And it's really important to take that time and just check in with folks.
Mm.
Well, this one something what I've also actually started doing for myself, apart from I think what Christy said and what Sheila said is true. Even I have put this 15 minutes, 20 minutes check-ins with my HR folks or even outside of the community. But again, whether I have a problem or not problem, I actually use EAP myself quite a bit. So, I mean, because it's confidential, you can talk to anyone. Sometimes you can just have someone to hear you out. So, that also really helps. And I think that's a very good tool. And yeah, so this is also something that really helps. Um, you know, I have really tried and kind of, kind of teaching my kids or my team members is also just build that courage. It's okay to go and just say hi to anyone and smile. So I think that also really helps, because at least some smiling face when you see it just gives you a bit of positivity. So
Mm.
probably that works very well for me. And I think some of these discussions, some meeting some new people, like today I'm kind of having this conversation. I think this gives me quite a bit of satisfaction and happiness that yeah, I'm there to contribute somewhere.
I definitely agree with everything that the ladies are saying. I would just go ahead and add, when you are a Department of One, sometimes you're not able to, do a lot in regards to you, right? And so sometimes, literally, I would say, and this is something that I learned from my little one, okay, is that he could tell when I was a Department of One, he could tell that I was already kind of on edge. And then when we were working from home, due to COVID, he would come over and he would say, dance, dance. So sometimes literally it just means just get up from your desk, get up. Simply that much, especially for a Department of One, getting up, and whether it's just walking outside and just, or it means, we even forget to take our potty breaks, right? Sometimes we're so into what we need to get done that we forget to go, and it's like, you know what? No, let me get up and go, right? So just simply get up, whether it's you stretch, whether it's, if you have a door and you can do a little silly wiggle, if that's what it means, then that's what it means. It's what makes you feel happy, and it's what makes you feel more at ease with everything that gets thrown your way.
Mm. How wonderful. And as I was listening, I was thinking, as a special thank you to all of you for sharing so openly and so vulnerably. I will also add two things that I do in addition to everything that you shared. This is actually the closing slide that I have in all my change workshops. And it's a happy, crazy looking daisy flower. And the text is, someone called me pretty today. Well, they actually said you're pretty annoying, but I only concentrate on the positive. And the voiceover that I use for that slide is that when we do change work, when we do HR work, oftentimes we are the face of something deeply unsettling and deeply uncomfortable. And even though it happens to us and in our presence, it is not about us. So that is one. I at one point I ended up printing it and having it next to my laptop. So I'm like, oh, someone called me pretty today. And I encourage people that I work with, be intentional with creating your own coping mechanism. And just sometimes you have to let things slide. And excuse me. The other one, and I learned this from a former line manager of mine. The other one is I always have a folder in my laptop, and it's called Smiles for When You Need Them. And whenever I get something nice and something uplifting and some sort of appreciation or recognition, I save it there. So when I have days when I'm like, enough is enough, I do open it randomly, and that really helps me, feel pretty again. I do want to spend a few minutes discussing. I oftentimes find myself in what I call lopsided conversations. What I mean by that is, what does the business need from HR, and what do business leaders need from HR? And my question to you is, that kind of flipped on its head. What does HR need from the leaders and from the business on the topic of mental health? Let's see. I see nodding on the screen. So, Christy.
I can jump in. One of the things I think leaders need to do, a few things. One is be open about their own mental health, being vulnerable, allows other people within their organization to be more vocal about that piece. Another thing is, when we're talking about benefits and cost, it's always focused on the health, 9 times out of 10. And having leaders or, our executives to say, let's spend some extra dollars. Like I've been fortunate enough at the company I'm at now that this past year when we did open enrollment, I was able to get them to spend a little bit of extra money to get us a free tele mental health, where now our employees can call at any time and get this piece. But not many organizations are willing to do that. And if they were bought in, this would make our jobs easier and being able to help save our other employees. If they would just simply do those 2 things, talk about it and give us the funds and the money to actually be able to implement these policies.
So I can go next. I think I have quite a huge list apart from what Christy said, so I'm not going to be repeating that. But then first thing, I really want leaders to understand that we're also human beings. And number 2, they must understand we can also make mistakes. So, I mean, HR is also not born with, no mistakes, anything can happen. I mean, we can also make mistakes. So, I mean, empathize with us once in a while, have that discussion and try and understand our perspective by being more vulnerable to both the sides. So not only keeping business one side, so sometimes just give that space and just some time. So I understand we're trying to close and we try to bridge all the gaps of the business, but a lot of times these issues can also happen that can make us. So give us that time, space, and hear and really, really just try to be in our shoes that what we are going through. Second is that good to kind of look at the business all the time, but probably have that balanced approach. So just space it out. So I think leaders must space out their deliverables by keeping this mental health portion also, that what people might be going through, and also at the same time they're also going through the same issues. So they need to also acknowledge that. So probably something what a leader might want to do, and I really would really look forward to have that leader who's vulnerable enough to talk about that he or she is also going through a such certain issue and needs some help, so that we can also work together, because that's a time when the real empathy will begin in the organization, when the real empathy will happen, when both sides are equally vulnerable and there to support each other. I will understand him and he will understand me. So yeah, these are 2 things I definitely want, apart from a lot of money, a lot of insurances, a lot of other things also.
Sandy.
What I would add would just being allowed to have that space, in the sense of if I'm at my wit's end, let's say, right, and I say, you know what, I just need to walk away. I just need to step out of the office for 5 minutes. I need to, but first let me tell you about what I need you to take care of this, and this. No. let me go outside. Let me, take that space to just be able to decompress, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever time frame it takes to just be able to regroup. Because sometimes we might be dealing with something that's extremely challenging, and it just the expectance that we can just handle it without a care in the world. An example, let's say, for example, you're just given the news that you have to let go of 30 people. And they expect you to start working on the paperwork that very same hour because it needs to get done by tomorrow. All those 30 people need to be gone. But you, as a human, right? We're talking, we're humans. We also understand, okay, well, on that list, I have 5 people that, that are maybe perhaps their child is sick right now. Or I have an individual on that list that is going through a divorce, or I have an individual, whatever their issue is outside of, the office, right? And you, because of the fact that you've taken that proactive approach of getting to know them, you understand what they're going through. Just having that space to where it's like, okay, let me regroup. If I'm going to be the one having to deliver those news, especially when I know what their struggles are at home, and it's not because it's performance, because it was something they deserved, or because you gave them plenty of opportunities to fix their performance, allow that space to just be like, okay, I'm gonna have to do something really tough, so let me just find that strength within me. So just them allowing that space, I think it's very key.
I think the other thing is that sometimes I think the C-suite looks at HR and specifically in the benefits arena as, we come to the table once a year and ask for money, and they don't know what is that money really doing, right? And so I think that one thing that HR can do to help this is have those conversations throughout the year. Let's talk to them on a very personal level about what's going on. And I think you can start that with data and reporting, what you're seeing. If you do have a mental health provider, you're probably getting reports from them. You can look at utilization, you can look at why the employees are going, and have those conversations, not just with your boss. Don't just send that to the head of Total Rewards. Make sure that that's getting all the way to the top. You need those folks to understand that this is a benefit that's truly impactful to their employees. And then I think you also are able to open up those conversations with those C-suite folks about, how are you doing? Having that conversation about not just how are you, but, genuinely asking them questions as well. And so if you have that kind of a relationship with somebody on the C-suite, making sure that you're talking about that, and really then, framing that and using storytelling from your experiences, like Cindy said, what's going on with these people, right? You have a really good idea what's happening here. And so it's like, take the time to just tell a story to that C-suite and let them know, is it because somebody just sent you a Slack or a chat that said, hey, thank you so much for providing this. It's really made a big difference to me. All those kinds of things. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, Olivia Frazier, I'm calling you out because, yes, C-suite leaders, stop using HR as the messengers for bad news. Not cool. We have to walk such a tight line anyway of caring for the business, caring for the employees. And when the C-suite pushes us over into caring for the business and it looks like that's over caring for the employees, it's really hard for us to do that mentally and then physically. It takes a toll. So I think having that conversation with them as well, like if you want to pull a benefit, if you want to do this or whatever for a budget reason, then suck it up and you be the one that sends that message out rather than making the HR team look like the bad guy.
Well, I am so, so sorry to say the most painful words, but we are about 6, maximum 7 minutes away from wrapping up our conversation. Just telling people in the audience, we do have the second panel of today. We will be talking about burnout. So if you have time, please make sure you stay online and you enjoy that conversation as well. Um, I was thinking about asking you to leave the audience with a very actionable takeaway. So as we sit in the energy of this conversation still, what would be your if you can do something differently starting right after today's Hacking HR panels, um, do this. What would this be? And in the interest of time, if it's okay with everyone, I will pass the e-mic around, and this time we will go clockwise. So Pallavi, you will go first.
So one actionable I want to take, I would like everybody to take is just keep smiling. Look at yellow color every day, and that will bring smile.
Wonderful. Thank you. Christy.
Heard a quote the other day it's kind of stuck with me for this year. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And that has stuck with me to a point that I would advise everyone, try to do things outside of your box, things that you would normally do. The reason being that has been a game changer for me in my mental health and my own journey, trying new things that I never thought I would love, and have now found new friends, new avenues, new places that I want to go. So try something different.
Wonderful. Sandy.
I would say no. Boundaries, know your limits, and don't allow anybody to push you to not follow those, to not, to go above when you know that you don't have the capability, not because you're not strong enough, but because it's already been a full day for yourself.
Wonderful. Sheila.
Oh, well, we've already talked about taking the break, and I noticed that somebody in the comments wrote about how if you've got a smartwatch or anything like that, you can set that bad boy up and, basically I always say at 10 minutes before the hour, my watch says, get up, lard ass, and get moving. And so you can do that as well. I think that's super important, but it really is about, making sure that you're focusing on you. And that's every piece of advice. It's kind of like I look around the panel, it's like check, 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 absolutely all of this stuff. But it really is only possible if you will focus on you and understand that you are enough, you are valuable, you deserve to have the breaks, you deserve to have the mental health, good mental health outlook. You deserve to have work-life balance. You deserve all of those things. And at that point, then, as Cindy said, set the boundaries and say, if you need to say no, you say no. If you need to say, I have to leave at 5 because I have to do something, then leave at 5. Whatever it is, you deserve that. You absolutely are critical in the role you're in, and you need to take care of yourself so you can continue to take care of others.
You've been absolutely wonderful, and I think it's pretty much a rare occasion in Hacking HR panel conversation history when the panelists went for the punchline takeaways without being prompted by the facilitator, which means that we have 3 minutes that I would love to give back to all of you panelists. And I would ask you, I am sure that as you thought about our panel today, there was something very meaningful to you that you wanted to say. And this is my open question to you. Is there anything that you didn't find a window of opportunity through our questions today to tell the audience, and you want to put it there? And it can be about anything and everything related to mental health in HR, and especially related to us being there for each other. And I will just give you a few seconds, and then I won't call you out. Just pop up and leave your message.
I'm gonna go right in. Remember you're badass. Remember you deserve grace. You deserve to know that it's okay not to be okay. And then let nobody tell you otherwise. So remember, you're badass.
Thank you, Sandy.
So a little different and opposite. I'll say, remember that, no one has bad intention. Everybody's good here. So trust, and I think they'll also trust you. So be happy.
Wonderful.
I keep remembering this book, The Secret, not The Secret, I'm sorry. I can't even remember the name of it. It's the 4 Agreements. And one of those, and a lot of conversations, was don't make assumptions. So as we move forward, never make assumptions about things, and don't take anything personal. As HR, we do sometimes have a tendency to take things personal, even as a female, that's worse. So remember that in your day job, because that does make a huge difference. And read that book. It's great.
Thank you. Sheila.
I'm not sure I have anything else to add. I'm a big talker already, but I just think I'm so thankful to Hacking HR for supporting this panel and for having this as a topic of conversation for January, because I think it's a great way to start out the new year. And it is amazing that we can have these conversations and be open and be transparent and bring in so many people that need this information. And I just love every one of you so much. I just can't believe such a room full of very, very intelligent women who are feeling and thinking. And I think that's just amazing. So thank you so much to Hacking HR.
Can I add one more thing? Because this comment is super duper key. Aisha, and I hope I pronounced your name properly. And if I butchered your name, I sincerely apologize. But she said, HR should be living example of work-life balance. We should be the living example. Remember, you cannot preach what you don't practice.
Thank you so very much. Pallavi, Christy, yes.
Sorry, I see a question about which book I mentioned. It's called The 4 Agreements.
The 4 Agreements. Thank you. Pallavi, Christy, Sandy, Sheila, thank you so very much for being here. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for taking the time and the curiosity and the space and the grace to be here for this conversation. Jessa, thank you. And just a quick reminder, stay online and invite friends online. In about 3 minutes, you will be here for a conversation about burnout, and we will have the wonderful Lauren Lefkowitz facilitating, so definitely a treat. Thank you, and see you tomorrow, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So happy to have you here today to talk about overcoming burnout, self-care, and wellness strategies for busy HR people. So glad to be with you today. If you have been on a session with me before, welcome back. If you're new, welcome in. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz, CEO of Fine as a Trap Coaching, and I work with executives and HR folks to get out of the trap of being fine. I have 20 years of HR experience prior to opening my coaching business, and I'm joined today by some amazing panelists, and I'm so excited to talk about you as HR professionals and really get into how you can help you before or during or after you've been helping others. So I'll welcome the other panelists to the stage with me now. And as they join, welcome in, welcome in. Oh, amazing, amazing. So glad to see all of you. Let's just go out around the room and in the order that I see you on the screen, Kristen, Anu, Tiffany, Peter, and Trisina. Hopefully I'm saying your names right. If I'm not, please correct me. And if you could all each introduce yourselves and tell us what you do and why you chose this panel today.
Absolutely. I will go ahead and get started. My name is Kristen Strunk. I am currently working for Manpower Group as their Director of Global People and Culture. Really chose to join this panel because at the end of 2023, actually sensed myself going through some of this and thought that if I could share some things that I learned or even maybe pick up some tips from some of the other panelists, that might be really helpful.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anu Mandapati, and I'm a global head of culture, DEI, and employee experience at Magic Leap. And the reason why I joined this panel is because I think it's all about taking care of ourselves so we can show up in the best way for all the people that we serve. So it's one of my favorite topics.
Hello, my name is Dr. Tiffany Bowden. I'm the CEO of Otesha Consulting. I have a PhD in communication, a certified psychological safety coach, and a person who's a survivor of workplace burnout. So I'm here because this is the space that I show up in. This is the space that I have been most passionate about and something I know is so important having gone through it before.
And hi, my name is Peter Kennedy. It's a pleasure to be here. I am an HR executive, global HR executive, worked in Europe for over 20 years, now based in Boston area. I've led a lot of different functions, but primarily the HR mergers and acquisition space, but also talent management and other sorts. At the moment, I am consulting with the companies on HR M&A space, and I'm a certified coach, so I do coaching as well. So this is a subject that's close to my heart. I think, you know, all of us, as we've been through COVID, in particular, managing our teams and being an HR professional during that time, it really woke up if we weren't already awake, it woke us up to the need for being attentive to well-being at work, starting with our own teams. And that doesn't always happen first. We're often out there helping others before we're helping ourselves. And so as we start this new year with new challenges, I think it's just, you know, a perfect topic to get us going. So I appreciate being here.
And I'm Trisina Lockhart. Thanks so much, Peter. I'm Trisina Lockhart. I am glad to be here. So thankful and grateful to Hacking HR just for what you guys are doing for all of us in the HR space. I think it seems like I've been doing HR and TA since I was born, at least since college. And I recently pivoted from an executive level VP role in a small tech firm into consulting. And it's been a blast so far. I've been extremely busy and just learning so much about what's going on out there in the space with individuals who are either challenged with finding jobs or trying to get back into the workforce. And so it's very exciting work for me. As Tiffany said earlier, probably felt burnt out many times. And as Peter said, during COVID, I've definitely felt like that disconnect that I feel like a lot of us who were remote did feel. And if we were remote for a long time before that, it really was tough. And so I am glad to talk to our audience today about this subject and to share some of my insights and things that I've done to just make the best of the situation and to make HR more fun.
Thank you so much. What an amazing panel. And what I heard from all of you is that we've all experienced burnout at some point, and we've all taken steps to move out of that. And this week is a lot of, we'll have a lot of conversation about burnout, about what we can do for our teams, what we can do for our employees, how we can manage to all of that. But this particular session is, and I'm going to say it again for our audience, because I really want them to hear that this is for us as individuals. Overcoming burnout, self-care and wellness for busy HR people. You in our audience are the busy HR people that we're talking to. So our MO as HR people very often is, what do I do for my team? What do I do for other people? How can I impact other people? And what I would love to really focus on today is, how can we focus on you? How can we pull you out of burnout? How can we help you discover if you're in burnout? And so panelists, as we get started, I'm not going to call on you in any kind of order. What I'm going to ask you to do is to put yourselves on mute if you're not speaking, and to take yourself off of mute. And I think you can all see the little mute microphone button. And just take yourself off mute, defer to each other, and let's all help each other have opportunity to speak. The question I'm going to start with today is, how do we know? I spent, and I'm sure some of you have as well, I spent a good deal of time in burnout before I recognized that I was in burnout. So for the people out here who are using the word busy, the people out here who are using the word overwhelmed, how do you know when you've crossed the line from there's a lot going on to I might be in burnout?
I think it's a really good question, and it's such a slippery slope often. And if we don't detect it early enough, it can actually take us beyond a burnout and take us to a nervous breakdown, which I think we probably all know people who've been in that place. And that's where you even have brain changes going on at that stage. So it's, I think it's a hard one. I think in burnout, when we start to truly experience burnout, I think we start to see behavioral changes. We start to see not only our inability to be productive, but depending on our personalities, changes in our moods, our ability to filter our emotions, where we may get angrier and more frustrated and sort of self-doubting and deprecating. Now, of course, it depends on who we are. We know who we are, and when that starts to change. But those are big indicators, I believe, like serious changes in the way that we're managing our emotion at work, and then certainly at home as well. And then, very importantly, is being able to keep a good relationship with the people we care about, both at work and at home, so that they could potentially detect changes in ourselves that we're not picking up as well, and just keep those relationships. But I'm more getting away from your initial question, but there's my first shot at it.
For me, when I think about it in terms of duration, right? So if I know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, like we are going into salary planning season and there's 3 weeks that are just going to be crazy, they're going to be busy, there's going to be a lot of information flying around, and I know that it's for a short duration, that to me feels different than the constant longer term. It's been going on for a while. There is no clear line in the sand where you can say, at this point in time, this will be over and I can take a breath. And I also think for a lot of HR individuals, we roll from one cycle into the other cycle, and we don't necessarily either plan those breaks for ourselves, or we just think that there's a point in the year where it will slow down, and unfortunately it doesn't. So being able to either plan a break or see a break, to me, is sort of the differentiator between stress and burnout.
Those are great comments, Kristen and Peter. I was just thinking about 15 years ago, I had a very rude awakening. I had a stroke as a result of work, and I was highly stressed out. I was firing on all pistons. My family was constantly saying, when you sneak into the closet at Christmas to just be on phone calls at work, it's becoming a problem, right? And I think that as HR professionals, we feel this onus to make sure we're protecting everybody in the organization, sometimes at the fault of protecting ourselves. And burnout can come in so many different ways. At that time in my life, I really felt tired all the time and exhausted. I felt like I just didn't even want to talk to my family at times. I would just be like, please, I just got off work, leave me alone, give me a few minutes. And when you start reflecting that in your social life, I think that's one of the number one markers that there's a problem or there's an issue. And if you start to see health transitions, as Peter was saying earlier, when you start to see your health changing, maybe your blood pressure is going up, you're getting agitated all the time. Every time somebody says something to you, even at work, you become defensive. And it's because you're feeling overwhelmed, and rolling from cycle to cycle, like Kristen said, always makes it really tough because you don't get a break and you feel like it's all on you. And if it doesn't go right, it's going to be a reflection on you. And somebody said yesterday, I was at church, and the minister said, die and see what happens. They'll just keep right on rolling along. And I think when we start to take that into perspective from a work, as far as work is concerned, it'll shift your mindset. But I think those are great comments that I've heard so far.
I think that's really spot on. And, a specific type of burnout that I think is relevant to this particular audience is compassion fatigue. And compassion fatigue is often talked about and experienced by healthcare professionals, caregivers, and other people in helping professions. But it's also something that's very relevant to HR. A lot of folks who come into HR, they do so because they want to help people. That's generally what the guiding compass is for people who go into these people professions. However, what happens is that when you are kind of in your day-to-day, and if you feel that you're not able to hold to boundaries that you might have around your self-care because of work demands, you may get to a point where you've gone past your boundaries and then also past your limits. And then once you go past your limits, that's when you start to get into this deeper kind of burnout space. And there's lots of different ways, as the panelists have discussed, it can show up. For me, what I see from a compassion fatigue lens is often very common is, more of those negative feelings and a reduction in compassion. Right. So it's like a complete inversion of the reason that you got into the space in the first place and how you think about it. You may feel very detached from your work, and that's not necessarily what your origin story was like. And that's not really what your true nature is like. But you're speaking from that place of I've had enough.
These are all great comments. I don't think I've too much more to add, but something that was coming up for me is this is going to impact, when it's impacting us emotionally, physically, or mentally. One of the things that I think about is any kind of psychiatric challenge. So we're talking about depression, we're talking about anxiety. When does that actually become a problem? It's when it's actually impacting your life. There's a significant change. So what Kristen was talking about earlier, I'm feeling stressed. This is, a 3-week sprint, and then there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Or is there significant enough change mentally, physically, emotionally, where it's impacting my life? Then I know I need to take a step back. And I think the biggest indicator sometimes is actually other people's response to us. If we're, it's a little bit harder sometimes for us to notice what's going on for ourselves, but if we're actually, sensing other people's responses of, what, I think that something's going on for you, or you're being really, you're snapping at me, or whatever that is, that's an easier indicator for us to actually see, because it's harder for us to see within ourselves. It's easier when someone else gives that kind of feedback.
Thank you so much. What amazing openers, and really, really powerful examples of things that have happened to us. For me, I drove past a stopped school bus and couldn't believe that I got a ticket in the mail, thought I deserved to pay triple what the ticket was. And I still didn't realize I was in burnout. And then I broke both of my shoulders trying to do too many things at once. I slipped and fell in my home while I was working and cleaning and doing a whole bunch of other things. And then I realized. And so I think for so many of us, we don't realize until we have a stroke, we have some sort of a breakdown with our mental health, we have a physical accident. So those are, strong ways to learn a lesson. But how can we as professionals in finding space to look out for ourselves? So before we talk about actually finding space, which I think can be challenging, what are some of the signs? And Anu, you started us with the how other people are reacting to you is a great sign. That if you're changing and other people are noticing that, it's a great sign. But before we get to the point where we're in it, how can we help ourselves assess, inventory, notice when things are heading towards burnout?
I think the first thing that we do is actually, we don't talk about the feelings at work, right? And so it's really about making sure that we can identify how it is that we're feeling. And it's not something that's discussed personally, it's not something that's discussed professionally, but the more practice that we get at identifying a feeling word, so what is that? And then the second question is, how do I want to feel? Third question is, then what is it that I do to be able to create that feeling? So if I'm feeling stressed, then I know that, this is another 2 to 3 weeks I'm going to be out of it. Or, wow, I've been feeling this way for months and months and months. So it's really taking that time to assess. But again, we move so quickly. We're looking at what's the next thing I have to do versus taking time to really reflect on how we are actually experiencing the moment, how we're actually feeling.
And I think also, Anu, I agree with you 100%. And it's the strength and ability to ask for others' perceptions of ourselves, which is difficult. But unless we really structure ourselves to say, I'm going to ask, I'm going to almost take a coaching position and ask powerful questions of other people's reflections of me, and ask for regular feedback. And I will also want to be willing to give it as well. So by creating a culture of that, which goes both ways. Because I do believe when we get self-deprecating and depressed, we don't see the signs. I think, like some of your stories that you've described so far, I mean, looking back at falling and breaking shoulders, it's nothing you'd ever plan to do. That would be, but when you look back on it, you say, oh yeah, these were the cumulative behaviors and changes that led up to that. And it's sort of like hindsight. It's only 50. We're blinded. So yeah, asking others feedback seems simple.
And I think the other thing is noticing how your inner voice, right? So not only how are you talking to yourself, but how are you reacting when things come up? For me, a lot of it, I notice it a lot when I get short with people, or even I respond in my head of, don't they know how busy I am? How can I possibly be on top of this when I'm doing so many other things? Like my inner responses get short and mean, and not like how I want to show up. But that's one of the first places I notice that stress has slipped to something more than stress. And for me, it's, kind of that internal, almost emotional awareness where you're thinking, oh, wow, that is different. And being able to at least notice it. So even if you are stressed, being able to take a few minutes in your day very much to think about how do I want to show up, and what am I going to do to make sure that happens, or how did I show up, and was that really how I wanted to be?
So I'll comment. I think that the answers that you guys gave are, again, we keep talking about spot on, but yes, definitely. For me, I think of like realistic signs for me are ones are like, I'm sitting in my car and I don't want to get out of my car. Like, I'm like, oh, it's like a hiding place, like you're sheltering yourself from the storm, or Sunday's coming, right? Saturday night hits and you're like, tomorrow's Sunday. It's my last day of freedom before, before I have to jump back into it. And I, again, thinking about different times in my life. I mean, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and sometimes you're in environments that are really hostile and you're trying your best to keep a smile on your face and being extremely compassionate. Like Dr. Bowden said, at times you feel like how nice can I be and still get my point across to these guys that I am overwhelmed, that I am starting to feel like my patience is short. I'm not able to meet all my deliverables, and not feeling like you're doing. I hear so many HR people say things like, I just don't feel like I'm doing a good job. And it's like, what they're doing, they're working their tails off, but it is because sometimes we're not able to leverage our experience in the way that other team members are and take a vacation. If HR takes a vacation, everybody goes, well, why do you need a vacation? As if our jobs are not taxing or we're not stressed all the time. And those are the things that make it a real challenge. And so I think when you start to say, I'm afraid to take a vacation, that's a clear sign. The hiding and also feeling like, I can't wait till Friday, or I don't want to see Monday.
I totally agree with everything that Ms. Lockhart just said. The Sunday scaries, as we, call it, is something that is a very real thing. And I can certainly remember plenty of times where, I have hidden in my car or, have worked out of conference rooms or even the bathroom to just simply avoid, the constant overexposure of like an open office floor plan, or, being in that kind of in-office environment. I think in my case, working remotely did help that because I was able to kind of take a minute. However, if you don't have the option of doing that, something to certainly watch for is if you don't feel like you have the ability to take a minute or to maintain your boundaries. Like, if you constantly are having people come to your desk, or you feel like you have to check an email, like there's not really kind of any, time block or something set aside for yourself, versus like when you're kind of in all of these administrative tasks, these things do certainly lead to that. But, one of the earliest signs that I think I see kind of consistent across the board is like this kind of increased fatigue. And that's like a very early sign. And it's not just like the usual tiredness. It's like a deeper sense of exhaustion that even when you rest, it just does not alleviate. So then you're feeling like you need to, maybe take a day off, but then you're also afraid to take a day off. And, so you maybe don't take the day off. So then you end up kind of spacing out at work, and you have losses of concentration because your body is trying to fight for your rest, but you're not actually giving it that support. So those are just some of the things that I do see. And I agree also with what the other panelists have already said.
And those are great. If I could just add, as I was listening, this tactic of avoiding situations that are normally part of our job to avoid the stress, but then equally avoiding self-care practices that we may have already been doing. And to the extent that we're self-neglecting, we're self-neglecting in that we don't carve out the time when things get so stressful that then leads to burnout. It's a slippery slope. So it gets into, how do we, gets into that whole challenge though of how do you carve out time for yourself, even in the best of times, and being able to analyze that whole practice. Like, is it something that you literally put in your calendar that says this is going to be these 15 minutes of mindfulness, and then treating it as almost like a job requirement? I mean, that's sort of stressful saying it that way, but putting more structure into our lives.
No, I love that, Peter. That's awesome, because we don't self-care. I mean, I was thinking about eating and working out, and especially being at home. I feel like the refrigerator calls my name, like, hey, come have a snack, because you're so stressed out, right? So there's all these things that are happening at one time. So you're already feeling burnt out. Then you're eating yourself to death because you're like, this is my comfort. Because you can't, especially as HR people, it's not like we can call an executive or another team member and say, you know what, it's just all too hard today. And they would understand, because they're looking for us for that support. And I just feel like, I was thinking the other day, if we just had a show of hands of how many HR people have gained weight over the last few years, because the work has increased. And there's this thought that because technology has been added, that our lives should be easier. And I have honestly, and I'm a huge fan of HRS systems and ATS systems, but I do feel like when you're managing like 6 of them, it becomes like, okay, I'm managing 6 of these. How is this helpful at this point? I'm starting to feel like I'm lost more in the shuffle. So anyway, off the topic that you had asked about, Lauren, but that's what I was thinking about, us all gaining weight and hopefully being able to exercise at some point and take care of ourselves, like Peter was saying.
I love what you both just shared, and I'm just thinking about what is our baseline? If we're actually stressed out, we're burnt out, that's really not the best time to actually recognize that we're burned out. So if we actually have a baseline of what are our norms? Normally, what do I do to take care of myself? What's the community that I've built? How do I exercise? Am I drinking enough water? Whatever that baseline is, if we know what that is, then we can say, you know what? Something's a little off, because when I start to eat lunch at 3 o'clock and I'm really, really hungry and starving at that point, or Tristina, what you said, I've got chocolate and I work from home and that's my go-to. Okay, am I doing that a little bit more often? So I think it is, Peter, you were talking about that reflection time, carving out that space. If we actually do treat that as non-negotiable, and self-care isn't selfish, so it's carving out just a little bit of time. It doesn't have to feel like it's another meeting in a to-do list, but it's really, wow, let's take a couple of minutes and and do something nice, whatever that is. Earlier I had talked about recognizing what you're feeling, and then thinking about how does it that I want to feel, and that third part of giving yourself whatever you need to transition. What does that renewal look like for you? It could be a couple of minutes, it could be an hour, it could be a vacation, whatever that is. We've got to slow ourselves down, and all of what all the panelists have shared, amazing, wonderful ways to identify, but I think it's very personal. What it might look like for me might not be what it looks like for someone else. So I think it's just we've got to build in self-awareness, and it's got to be non-negotiable. Otherwise, we're just going to keep reacting, and then we're going to be exhausted. And at some point, I think that it would affect physical health, not just emotional and mental. So what can we do to be proactive is what I wanted to add.
That's excellent. And I just wanted to add, we also have to truly believe that self-care is an investment in productivity.
And I think that baseline, Anu, as you mentioned, is so important, because when we do get away from those things that keep us grounded, it's easy to say, well, it's just for this short period of time, or, one meeting at 4 o'clock in the morning won't be such a big deal. But when it starts to happen, for weeks and weeks at a time, and your sleep is interrupted, now, okay, we've created a pattern for ourselves that we have to take some responsibility to back out of, to know this is not normal, this is not sustainable, and understanding those things that will pull you back to center, whether it's time with your family, time, away from your desk, time doing something creative, but those things that will pull you back and keep you grounded, because the ultimate end game here is not who wins at work. As much as we all want to contribute, and as much as we all want to give, it's an important thing that we do, but it isn't necessarily the most important thing that we do.
I was just thinking about the times that I have, been performing at my highest level at work. And I will tell you, it directly, correlates with the times that my boundaries have absolutely been intact. And I'm talking about, I have calendar blocks in the morning, every morning, because that is when I'm on the treadmill. I have a calendar block at lunch, because that is when I'm eating. And I have a calendar block at a certain time at the end of the day, because that is when I am logging off, and I am not doing things on the weekend. And it is so important to develop your routine and to have your boundaries. If you are someone who doesn't know what your boundaries are, or you haven't really done that inventory and that work to actually write out what your boundaries are and what are the things that hold you up, then that is quite literally that pipeline and that path to burnout, because by definition, burnout is when you're going past your boundaries, right? Consistently. But if you don't know what your boundaries are, then how can you actually protect yourself? So, making sure that you first, as a first step, know what those boundaries are, and then actually implement that as a part of your work process is very important.
That's so true. It's so important what you described. And as you were talking, I was thinking the importance of intentionality, of being intentional in what we do. And the more I'm intentional, the more I create structure for myself, the more I have a sense of control. It's not crazy control, but it's control. We all need that. And the extent that we don't have that and it's slippery, we lose control. And all of us know that, stress comes from a lack of perceived control, and burnout especially does. So yeah, well said.
All I heard was boundaries. We need them. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. So as we're all talking, I'm also paying attention to the comments coming in from our audience. And there seems to be this combination of, yes, self-care is not selfish, and cheers for that. And also a comment here from MJ Gomez. I feel like HR has to keep it up. We are not allowed to have a down moment. And so we have this sort of binary look at either we're looking out for ourselves, and so we are selfish in the bad way, and people won't allow that, or we're completely not looking out for ourselves and will burn out at some point anyway. So if we look along the spectrum, there's a huge spectrum in the middle of that. But if we look along the spectrum, and if we're giving advice to the folks who are watching now, to the folks who watch on the replay, and we start talking about the doing of it, kind of like if we say, I'm going to go to the gym 6 days a week, 2 hours at a time, and I haven't been to the gym in 6 years, the first time I go to the gym will be the last time I go to the gym because I can't do it for 2 hours. I'm exhausted. Everything hurts. And all I think about is I don't want to go back. So if we can give some advice to our listeners, to our watchers, in where to start, where to begin with setting boundaries. And I see Dr. Bowden, you've already unmuted. You're ready for this one. Where do we begin to even look at how we can look out for ourselves?
Well, thank you, Lauren. I came off mute so fast because you're speaking my language. So not only am I, an HR girly, I'm also a fitness girly. And I have done exactly that. Like I have, gone off, from working out and training for a long time and then come back, really fast, like just wanting to, hit the ground running and maybe meet myself where I was perhaps 6 months to a year prior. And you know what happened? I would get a stress fracture. I would end up in, an orthotic boot. I would end up with a sprained ankle or some other kind of issue because ultimately I wasn't honoring the space that I was at and I wasn't making that incremental change. So it's like really, really important to start small and to, just like focus on the accessible habits. And, even for like the context of the metaphor of the gym, it's really not the best idea to set your goals like too high because it becomes painful, if not unattainable and not sustainable. So you're not going to even want to come back to the gym. So like when I'm going back to, that space, what I do is I might start off with like a 10-minute walk and just to get used to, getting back into the movement. Once I hit that for maybe 3 days, then I may bump it up to a 20-minute or a 30-minute situation, right? So the same thing actually applies in, the workplace and the boundaries that we want to set and the goals that we want to set. These things do have to be attainable and they do have to be sustainable. And what that looks like for you today does not necessarily look like what it meant yesterday or even like 3 months from now. So like really doing some kind of honest inventory of what can you do and what can you do, frankly, when you're starting off easily, just so that you can build yourself up some momentum and some endorphins and some I can do it to you, and then, as you kind of hit that successfully over time, then you can put in a slight stretch. So if anybody has ever been to yoga, they tell you like you want to move until you feel a slight stretch. You don't want to feel pain. You don't want to feel, you don't want to get into the space to where you're actually like kind of pushing yourself to a point of no return. So this same thing kind of can be brought into this space of our workplace values too.
Yeah, and I would add that the importance is finding an activity that we really enjoy, and put differently, an activity that we're not answering a question of something we should do. Because there's a lot of shoulds in our lives. I should be doing this. I should be, if only I should. Finding those activities that, if for me, I'm not as much of a runner at all, so I wouldn't choose running. I mean, if I chose running, like a lot of people I notice on the beginning of the year, they're out there running, and I've never seen them around my neighborhood running, and they probably won't be there for another couple of weeks because they're going to give it a try. But being able to play music, or being able to take a simple walk, or I love to do yoga, so just finding someone who facilitates you with yoga for 15 minutes in the morning is important, I think, because the potential for self-judgment just increases every time we're telling ourselves we should be doing something, because that's the activity of the day.
And I think you're both spot on in terms of how to continue to care for our bodies and take these small steps. I think for boundary setting, when it comes to being in human resources, when you feel like you always have to be available, you always have to be responsive. I've started using the signature line in my email to say what my normal working hours are. My normal working hours are from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time. I typically will take an hour for lunch, and it is right in the signature line of my email. Being able to try some little steps like that to practice setting boundaries when in HR we don't feel all the time like we can, because we are the caretakers, that can be something that can be small. You can try it, and then you can take another step.
I totally agree with everything that everyone said. I mean, this is a really great panel. Everybody's giving such great feedback, and I'm learning so much from each one of you guys, and being reminded of so many things that we should already know as HR people to take care of ourselves. But that signature line one is a great one, because I do feel like, there's always an emergency for HR, and especially if you're in a small organization. If you're in a large organization, sometimes you can navigate things a little bit. There may be team members that you can call and ask to help you out or things like that. But when you're in a small organization and there's only maybe 2 or 3 HR people who really specialize in the specific area, and they really don't have the knowledge, right? And you're the HR leader, it can be very taxing at times. And I think the best thing for me has been to just be honest with the other leaders who may be able to share with the most senior executives. So if I tell my peers who are also VPs that, hey, I'm feeling really burnt out, and I'm going to start taking lunch at these times. I'm going to take a meditation during the day, and I start encouraging them to do that. And then they start to talk about how great it is and how it's impacting them in such a positive way. It helps for the executive team to hear that before they think, oh, HR is doing it. And it sounds like we're under a different microscope than other employees. And sometimes when I'm posting things and I look at the responses and sometimes what people are saying back, and I say something about how HR is not always seen in the same light as our peers, people think it's like an excuse. But as an HR person, if you're in it every day, you know that there's certainly an expectation that we are always compassionate. We're never down, as I think you said, one of the contributors in the chat had said, that we're always smiling and bubbly. And sometimes we just had a terrible day or a terrible morning, or we have all these things going on in our personal lives. So the more that we can say, like you said, Tiffany, little chunks of like walking, taking a deep breath, meditating, setting really clear boundaries, not working on the weekend from the very beginning. Because I think what happens is we try to show ourselves as being like flexible and I'm available. And we do it 2 or 3 times by answering a call on the weekend. And then people think that's okay. And you can't set that precedent. You have to immediately, when you start a job, or if you're transitioning or changing or trying to, in 2024, I'm going to do things different. If you tell people, I'm setting boundaries for myself so that they know what your boundaries are and they're clear on them. And I think the more that we can communicate that, the better we'll all feel. And the more that we can take the onus ourselves and say, hey, you know what? I'm not the person, I can't control what others are doing, but I can control what I do.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to address this, but no, absolutely. I think that the boundaries is really important, and I think especially first thing in the morning, like that's kind of where you set the tone for the rest of your day. Like one of the comments had mentioned the 20-20-20 morning formula, and that's from the book 5 a.m. Club. And that's effectively, it's 20 minutes of movement, 20 minutes of reflection, and 20 minutes of learning. That's kind of what that formula is. I absolutely followed that. I actually stumbled into that, after I was kind of already doing it. To be honest, I'm more of the 7 a.m. club. I'm not really a 5 a.m. girly. So you can apply this whether you are a 10 a.m. person or an 8 a.m., 9 a.m. The principle of the matter is that you start your day with some of those guided principles, and you give those things to yourself before you give yourself to other people.
I love that. I am not a 5 a.m. person either. So yeah, not me. Um, One of the things that's coming up for me is we're always training other people in how they're treating us. And so we set these boundaries, and if it's a new boundary for someone, they're going to test it, and that's okay because I'm going to reset that boundary. So if I have a block on my calendar at 12 o'clock and that's my decompression, I'm going to eat lunch, step away from my laptop, and if that's something that I'm making, so I see it as a commitment to myself. And if someone schedules a meeting, then I'm just going to say, hey, I'm not available at this time, and let's actually move it to earlier or after. So I think we're always training other people and how they treat us. So if we're setting that boundary and they're not responding or respecting or reacting to it in the way that we want, then we reset that again. I think that there's an assumption that we can't, insert whatever it is after that when it comes to us. We can't eat our lunch in peace. We have to be available all the time. It's how we set those boundaries, but it's just ways of working. And the more that we start doing it, we're role modeling it to other people and how they can be too. I remember that in a previous organization, we had our chief diversity officer let everyone know that the CEO of the company asked to meet with her, and she said, I'm not available for 20 minutes for the until 20 minutes later. And it was just interesting because a lot of people took a step, like a visible, pull back, and they're like, really, you can set boundaries with the CEO? Yes, because we're all human, we all want to be at our best, and so what is it that we need? And it's actually okay to say no. And the last part of this is, I think sometimes we think we need to get permission from other people. The person we need to get permission from is ourselves. So the more that we start doing things for ourselves, that's just going to become the norm. And I think it's just, what was said even earlier when we first started this part of the conversation, small steps. And I think it's practice. It's not perfection. So it's not about, did I set a boundary every single time? It's how do I start to practice this and build this muscle so I'm able to do it more, more consistently and more often.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think as you said, we're role models. HR, we're sort of like the leading edge when it comes to these types of programs, but also culture change. So when any leader wants to talk about culture and what is culture, I think to the extent that as HR professionals, and the higher we are up on the leadership chain, we can perhaps do this better. But to really learn about the impacts of well-being and self-care on productivity, on creativity, on loyalty, on satisfaction and employee engagement, and the extent that we have data that we can take outside of HR to convince others up our line, up to the CEO even potentially, that this way of being where we attend to our care first is good for everyone. But it takes a bit of learning.
No, totally agreed, Peter. And I knew that was a great comment. I just thought they respect the executive team respects you more, the more boundaries that you set with them. It's a weird thing. People think, they're going to get mad. Nope. They're like, okay. Oh, you need a break. Oh, they like that. They actually like for you they like to know that you will stand your ground when it comes to something that you think is important. And a lot of times as HR people, it's intuitive to us to help right away. And it's like, it's not helpful for me. I don't remember who said it out there in the ethos, but It was, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. The kind of airplane, put the cup on your mouth before you put it on your children. Well, if you don't put it on you first, you're not going to be able to save your children. So it's the same concept. So I love that. And the comments are just great.
I remember several years ago as an organization, we were tasked with rolling out our well-being strategy and practices across the entire organization. So we were the team driving this for the entire company. We weren't practicing it. And I had taken a day off, and then my leader had said, we have this one quick thing. I know you're off today. Can you help out? That one quick thing ended up being half of the day versus just a quick 20 minutes. And remember again that we were tasked with rolling out all these well-being strategies, and what we were saying to other people is what we weren't doing. So, that had ended. And the next time I took vacation, but prior to that, there was a request that was coming in, and I said, fantastic, I'm more than happy to help do that after I come back from vacation. So even within our own team, so even within HR, we've got to be able to set and reset those boundaries. It's not just outside of HR, it's within our own teams as well.
Beautiful. I love the airplane analogy, and I also love the I don't remember who said it to me first, but it lives in my head. You can't fill a car with gas while the car is driving. Everybody needs a stopping point, a rest point, a recharge point, a gas up point, and that includes us, because we get into burnout when we are taking care of everything but us. Excuse me. Inconvenient time to cough. What have you noticed in your own careers or in how you've been advising others? I know some of you have done consulting work, some of you are doing inside work, some of us are coaches. My apologies. What have you done where you have noticed like a speedy change, right? We all have to start with training and retraining and boundary setting and resetting. What are some quick wins? If you're a person who's in burnout, or if you've been a person who's been in burnout, what are some like really quick things that you've been able to implement without a lot of work that have given you great benefit?
Okay, I'm going to jump out there. If you're not happy and you're taxed and you're stressed and nobody's hearing you, leave. I know it sounds hard. It's tough out here, especially in talent acquisition and HR right now. You see how many jobs, you see people posting every day that they're laid off. So it's a challenge. But when I've tried to stay places that I felt like I was like going to lose my mind, and I started to lose my mind. And I was like, you've got to take care of yourself, because in the end, they're not going to want you there either. So you might as well go ahead and make a decision for yourself if it's not the right decision. And it doesn't have to be done in a day. Like, it doesn't have to be like, I quit today. It can be like, okay, I don't want to say quiet quit, because we hate that in HR, but I'm going to start backing out of things and I'm going to start looking. And that's okay, because that might even help you feel better about your situation, knowing that you trust yourself enough to go risk going to find a new job.
So that's excellent. That's like one end of the continuum. And then there's actual concrete practice that I've sort of implemented with my team was right around COVID. I was managing a team across 14 countries in Europe, and we were a remote, practically only remote HR M&A function. And I started to implement a coffee morning before we even did roundtables. We did a bunch of roundtables later, which were really helpful for people to join. But the coffees were anywhere in Europe. Slack, we used Slack. Here's our coffee channel. Everyone can have their cup of coffee. Again, remember, these aren't people who are in the office, they're working remote. And the rules of the game were, we're not going to talk about work during coffee. We're going to talk about what we're doing for ourselves. We're going to talk about something fun we did. We didn't have these draconian rules, but the purpose was to really be a part, create a community. And I think for those of us who are more remote or in a larger organization where we're feeling remote, creating a community is where it really begins, where we can get that feedback and ask for feedback and share good ideas around self-care. So there's just an idea.
Yeah, and I think for me, I am a huge user of my calendar. I use it for everything. But what I was noticing is that my meetings were stacked 2, 3 at a time, right? So I was overbooked, I was double booked. I was using it in the moment to make decisions about where my priorities were. You know, what was the most hot and burning thing, and that's the meeting I had to go to. Starting at the beginning of January, at the beginning of the week, I go through and I decline or reassign all of the meetings that are double booked. I get my calendar so I have one thing going on at a time. It sounds really very simple, but even just the looking at all of the things was causing me just this sense of overwhelm. And it's like, no, if I'm responsible and I do a clear handoff and I say, I can't make this, I notice your calendar's open, can you please be there? Here's the 2 things you need to report. Here's the 2 things you need to ask. And I can delegate that, even just because that takes another 10 minutes of my time. But knowing that it's taken care of and I don't even see that it is happening has really helped me. And so there's a couple quick wins like that where, you know, cleaning up your workspace, cleaning out your calendar. I came back after Christmas and I archived all of my email. I took it down to inbox 0 because I could not handle what was already there. And I'm like, well, if they need me, they'll find me, I guess. So some of those things that we think of as really simple can at least reduce the stress level. So you're starting from that baseline.
I really like that. And I was just going to add into that, you know, one of the exercises that I do with my coaching clients, which I deal with a lot of clients that are experiencing workplace burnout, including HR professionals. And that is that I have them draw what looks like a target, or it's like a bullseye, if you will. And in the inner circle of that are the things that they can control. And in the middle of that, it's like, okay, well, what are the things that, you know, you can maybe influence, but you don't have full control over? And on the outer perimeter, it's what are those things that you have concern about, but you can't influence and nor do you control. What I find as a pattern is that most of the time, people's energies are going towards the things that they maybe can influence or that they are concerned about, but not as much on the things that they can control. So they feel out of control because they are not in control of the things that are not inside of that center. And they're not actually managing or mastering or putting their energy towards the things that they can control. So they're kind of in this, you know, weird relationship with the things in their life, and they're out of accountability for the things that they can control. And sometimes that comes down to a fear of failure for actually addressing the things that's in their domain to do something about. And sometimes they just don't have visibility to what they can actually do about a situation. I find that when people actually focus on the things that's within their sphere of influence that they can control, that they do experience like a fairly immediate relief, and they can let go of some of those other things. Now, if they are, however, doing all of the things that's inside of their control, they're setting their boundaries, they're practicing their self-care, they are, you know, taking their time off, they're eating their lunch, they're getting to sleep, they're drinking the water, they're, you know, using their FMLA, they're going to therapy, they're doing all the things, they've done EAP, but then they still can't necessarily create a space of peace or respect or maintain boundaries in their workplace. They're dealing with microaggressions. They've got all sorts of things going on. Yes, now it's a time to still stay in that pocket of control and use your option to potentially leave, because you don't want to necessarily stay in an environment that is going to cause you residual harm, so that you are going to go into your next space burnt out. Like, you want to be able to go into a space fresh and available and excited and with your compassion and your inner light on. And you can only do that if you protect yourself.
And just to add on that, I think it's
I
brilliant
love those
what you
comments.
just described.
Sorry.
Just a quickie, and then Tracina. I mean, the piece about the control is, you know, of the things that we can control, there's that exercise of saying, how much time do we spend on each of those things in a week? And if we're over 100%, you know, this is not a tenable model. And so it's either quitting, as you suggested, or it's okay, so which of those things that are in my control do I really have to be controlling? Because sometimes it's things that we put in our own bag that isn't really, but we often do that. We create our own. Just an observation that was brilliantly stated, though. Really nice, Trisina.
No, I all of you guys are brilliant. These are great. Somebody put chicken soup for the soul on here, and that's how I feel. I feel very warm and fuzzy inside right now because you don't feel alone, right? But I loved. I heard Kristen say inbox zero, and I'm like, yes, that's like a great thing to do. And then let people know if it's something you need to circle back to me on, fine. But right now I have to start fresh. And I love circle of control that Tiffany talked about, because it just makes you feel like, if you're fighting a battle that you can't win, you're going to stop fighting. But if there's the little things that you can do that I can influence, I can change this, I can stop answering everybody's questions when they ask them right away, answering every email 2 minutes after it gets there. I felt myself so many times in calls and even in interviews, my email would still be pinging, even when I put or Slack, even when I put do not disturb on, it would still ping. And then I'd feel like, oh, it's the CEO, I need to respond. And it's so rude to the people who you're working with and talking to, because they don't feel as though you're present or that you are engaged with them fully. And so the more that we can control those types of things, the one thing that I didn't hear any of us say that was top of mind for me was delegation. How can we delegate more of the things that we feel like we have to control, that maybe we do have a circle of control, but we can give it to somebody else and say, hey, you take this, I don't have to own it. I think that's a huge one as well, is to just delegate wherever you can.
Thank you so much. And Anu, I see that you have something, but we only have about 2.5 minutes left. So I really want to get to this wrap-up question, which we've all touched on a little bit, but if you could each just give me sort of your 30-second view on where do you reach out for help? We talk about HR being isolating. We talk about trying to do everything ourselves. We talk about a lot of people depending on us. Where do you go? Who are your people?
I think for me, it actually kind of piggybacks on Ms. Lockhart's last statement about delegation, is that, I look to the people that I hire as that source of help. And it's like understanding that I don't have to be superwoman, that I can trust my people, that, I've cultivated, a space around me to where, other people are also up to great things and it doesn't have to all come down to me. Is so important. That was something that I had to learn not only in the core workplace, but certainly something I even had to learn as an entrepreneur, because you will collapse under your work if you don't allow yourself to be supported.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that, Tiffany. I agree 100%. It's the people who are part of my team. And of those team, there's always a couple that I feel closest to. And I think that anyone on the team who feels that if you're the boss can turn to and acknowledge that we're human and we have need to address our own needs. That's good. It's good for the team. It's good for everyone. So I agree with you.
I'd say an external HR community, so connecting with other people, seeing what they're doing, and so knowing that we're not alone. Sometimes if we're in an organization, we're reaching out to this, same people, same way of thinking, same way of doing things. It's actually helpful to connect with people outside of the company as well.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I think I agree with the answers that everybody gave. I mean, your internal support team, there's nothing like that. Being able to be surrounded by people who know and understand what you're going through and who you can give privileged information to, maybe what's happening. You don't have to talk specifically about a person or anything like that, but they may understand what's happening in the HR space better than some other peers. But also making allies of the business. If there's other business leaders that you can trust and help to advocate for you internally, that's a huge one for HR. I feel like HR does not always have enough allies internally. And if we can have those who are out there, singing your praises, talking about what you're doing, so that then some of your talking about what you're doing that's awesome, but also talking about where you're also stressed, and that they can help advocate for you in those areas.
Thank you so much, everybody. I could stay on this conversation with all of you all day long. I think we have had such a rich conversation, beautiful comments. If you've been watching, if you're watching in the replay, connect to these folks and me on LinkedIn. We have things to say. We have ways to help you, whether it's through community, whether it's through services that we offer. But build your HR community. You are not alone, even if you're a department of one. You are not alone in a large department, but you get to decide when you're willing and able to reach out. Thank you so much all for being here and being with me in such an important conversation, and have a wonderful day.
Thank
you all.